On May 8, 1972, a hijacked Sabena airliner sat motionless on the tarmac at Lod Airport in Israel, with 100 passengers enduring their second day as hostages. 4 hijackers armed with pistols and grenades patrolled the aisles, their demands growing increasingly desperate. Outside, behind a perimeter of military vehicles and spotlights, Israeli negotiators played for time. Meanwhile, a plan was unfolding that would redefine hostage rescue operations across the globe. Unbeknownst to the hijackers, 16 of Israel's most elite commandos were about to approach their aircraft wearing white coveralls and carrying toolboxes. Posing as aviation mechanics arriving to fix a fabricated technical issue, within minutes of boarding, they would execute a rescue so precise that nearly all hostages survived, and all 4 hijackers were neutralized before they could detonate their explosives. This is the story of Operation Isotope, a mission where Mossad and Sayeret Matkal turned deception into an assault tactic, where white coveralls became combat uniforms, and the line between maintenance crew and special forces operators completely blurred. It is a tale of calculated risk, instantaneous violence, and the moment Israel demonstrated that hijacked planes were no longer safe havens for terrorists. The operation captured international headlines not only for its success, but also due to the individuals involved. Among those 16 commandos in white coveralls was a young officer named Benjamin Netanyahu, who would later become Israel's prime minister. His unit commander, Ehud Barak, would also rise to the prime minister's office decades later. But on that May day, they were merely soldiers executing an immensely dangerous mission where every variable had to align perfectly, or everyone on board could perish. To understand how mechanics became an assault team, one must grasp what brought Flight 571 to Israel, and why Palestinian militants believed seizing a civilian airliner would aid their cause against a nation that had fought for survival throughout its existence. The operation began 48 hours earlier, on May 8, 1972, when Sabena Flight 571 departed Brussels en route to Tel Aviv. The Boeing 707 carried 90 passengers and 10 crew members. A routine commercial flight, it attracted little attention from Belgian security. 4 passengers boarded with perfectly legitimate tickets purchased days earlier. 2 men, 2 women. They carried no weapons detectable by metal detectors, no explosives that screening procedures could uncover. They appeared as ordinary travelers, but they were extraordinary passengers. They were members of Black September, a militant Palestinian organization responsible for increasingly brazen attacks on Israeli and Western targets. The 4 militants had trained for weeks, rehearsing their roles until every move became automatic. They knew the aircraft's layout, understood crew protocols, and studied past hijackings to learn from both successes and failures. 30 minutes after takeoff, as the plane reached cruising altitude over Austria, the 4 rose simultaneously. The men, Ali Taha and Therese Halsa, moved forward toward the cockpit. The women, Rima Tanis and another militant whose name was never confirmed, took positions in the passenger cabin. They revealed weapons hidden in places that seemed impossible to conceal. Firearms and grenades assembled from components smuggled in pieces, avoiding detection through meticulous planning and exploiting gaps in 1972 aviation security protocols. The takeover was swift and professional. Within 90 seconds, they controlled the aircraft. One hijacker entered the cockpit, pressing a pistol to Captain Reginald Levy's head and ordering him to maintain course awaiting further instructions. The other 3 secured the passenger cabin, commanding everyone to remain seated and silent, warning that resistance would lead to the destruction of the plane. They conspicuously displayed grenades, making clear that any attempt to overpower them would trigger an explosion, killing all on board. The passengers, a mix of Israeli citizens, European tourists, and business people, complied immediately. Some had military training and considered intervening, but the confined space and presence of explosives made resistance suicidal. They sat quietly, hands visible, making no sudden movements as the hijackers established control protocols that maintained their authority over the aircraft for the next 48 hours. Captain Levy, an experienced pilot with thousands of flight hours and emergency experience, maintained professional composure. He followed the hijackers' instructions impeccably, understanding that his cooperation bought time and preserved lives. When ordered to change course, he complied, altering the flight path without argument. When told to contact Belgian air traffic control and relay new demands, he transmitted exactly what they dictated. His voice remained steady and professional despite the pistol pressed to his skull. The hijackers voiced their demands through Captain Levy's radio transmissions. They demanded the release of 317 Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails, specific individuals held on charges from terrorism to weapons smuggling. They set a deadline. If Israel did not agree within 48 hours, they would begin executing hostages and eventually destroy the plane. They ordered Captain Levy to fly to Lod Airport, Israel's main international hub, calculating that landing on Israeli soil would increase pressure on the government and ensure maximum publicity. The decision to fly to Lod, rather than landing in a neutral country, showed both strategic thinking and operational naivety. Landing in Israel gave the hijackers leverage by placing the plane under threat on Israeli territory, creating a crisis that could not be ignored or delayed. But it also gave Israeli security forces direct access to the situation, control over the environment, and the ability to conduct operations that would have been impossible if the plane remained in international airspace or landed in a country where Israel lacked operational freedom. Israeli air traffic controllers tracked the hijacked plane as it approached their airspace. Military aircraft were scrambled to monitor its flight path, maintaining visual contact, while ground forces at Lod Airport activated emergency protocols designed specifically for hijacking scenarios. By the time Flight 571 landed at 1647 on May 8, Israel Defense Forces commanders were already assembling to assess options and authorize operational planning. Prime Minister Golda Meir convened an emergency cabinet security meeting within an hour of the hijacking. Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, Chief of Staff David Elazar, and Mossad Director Zvi Zamir were present alongside senior military and intelligence officials whose expertise would inform the government's response. Discussions were frank and urgent. Israel's policy on hostages was unambiguous: no negotiations, no concessions, no prisoner releases in response to terrorist demands. But policy was easier to proclaim than implement when 100 lives hung in the balance. Golda Meir made a principled decision immediately: Israel would not release prisoners. Setting such a precedent would provoke endless hijackings and kidnappings as terrorist organizations realized Israel would trade prisoners for hostages. The decision was morally agonizing and politically dangerous, requiring the Prime Minister to accept that some hostages might die rather than yield to blackmail. But Meir believed, as did her security advisors, that yielding would ultimately cost more lives by encouraging future attacks. Having decided what Israel would not do, the government then authorized military planners to develop what Israel would do: storm the plane, neutralize the hijackers, rescue the hostages. The mission fell to Sayeret Matkal, the elite special forces unit that conducted Israel's most sensitive operations behind enemy lines, hostage rescues, and covert missions requiring surgical precision and absolute discipline under extreme stress. Sayeret Matkal commander, Lieutenant Colonel Ehud Barak, received authorization to plan and execute the rescue operation. Barak was 30 years old. He was already a legendary figure in Israeli military circles for operations conducted deep in enemy territory. During the War of Attrition, he possessed the operational experience, tactical creativity, and psychological composure needed to lead a mission where success meant flawless execution and failure meant catastrophic losses. Barak assembled his assault team from Sayeret Matkal's most experienced operators. 16 commandos selected for close-quarters combat skills, accuracy under stress, and the ability to make instant decisions in chaotic environments where hostages and adversaries would be intermingled. Among those selected was Captain Benjamin Netanyahu, then 23 years old, serving his second stint in the unit after officer training. Netanyahu's role would prove critical. He would lead the team responsible for neutralizing the hijacker in the passenger cabin, while Barak's squad secured the cockpit. The tactical challenge was colossal: how to penetrate a hijacked plane without provoking immediate hostage executions. Hijackers watching the doors would see any obvious assault attempt and detonate explosives before the team could intervene. Traditional dynamic entry methods, blowing doors, throwing stun grenades, rushing in with overwhelming speed, would result in hostage deaths before commandos reached the hijackers. The team needed an approach that would allow operators to get inside the aircraft, close to the hijackers, before anyone realized an assault was beginning. The solution came from combining military deception with operational audacity. Convince the hijackers that the people boarding were non-threatening maintenance personnel responding to a fabricated technical issue. Create a scenario where hijackers would permit those they believed to be mechanics to enter, move through the cabin, and take positions next to the terrorists before revealing their true purpose. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity and terrifying in its risk. If the deception failed, at any moment the hijackers could realize they faced assault forces and immediately detonate explosives. Mossad psychologists joined planning sessions to assess the hijackers' psychology and predict how they would respond to various scenarios. The assessment indicated that hijackers, after 24 hours of high stress without resolution, would be exhausted, agitated, and increasingly concerned about the plane's condition. If presented with a mechanical problem threatening the aircraft systems, they would likely permit maintenance access rather than risk being trapped aboard a non-functional plane. The key was creating an issue that seemed urgent but not immediately catastrophic, requiring immediate inspection but implying nothing suspicious. The fabricated scenario was devised with careful attention to plausibility. Israeli officials would inform the hijackers that a malfunction had been detected in the aircraft's air conditioning and pressurization systems, requiring immediate inspection. If left unaddressed, the system would fail completely, making the cabin unbearably hot and ultimately uninhabitable. Mechanics would need to board to diagnose and fix the problem. Hijackers could observe their work, ensuring they carried only tools and equipment, nothing that appeared armed or threatening. To make the deception convincing, Israeli authorities borrowed white coveralls and toolboxes from actual Sabena maintenance crews. The commandos would wear identical uniforms to real mechanics, carry authentic tools, and behave exactly as maintenance personnel would. They rehearsed their roles on mock-ups, practicing how mechanics walk, interact with crew, inspect systems, and discuss technical issues using appropriate terminology. Every detail had to be flawless because hijackers looking for deception would notice any discrepancy suggesting these were not real mechanics. Weaponry presented a unique problem. The commandos needed firearms that could neutralize hijackers instantly without penetrating the aircraft's pressurized hull and causing catastrophic decompression. They needed bullets that would immediately stop a target but not overpenetrate and hit hostages seated behind. 22 caliber pistols loaded with specialized ammunition designed for hostage rescue in close quarters combat. The small caliber would not penetrate the fuselage, and carefully aimed headshots would neutralize targets without requiring multiple rounds, increasing the risk of collateral damage. Each commando concealed a pistol inside his toolbox, buried beneath wrenches, screwdrivers, and diagnostic equipment. They practiced drawing and firing in one motion, transitioning from appearing to inspect tools to engaging targets in less than 1 second. Rehearsals were exhaustive. Countless scenarios were run through, with variables changed: hijacker positions, hostage reactions, timing of the assault signal. Each operator had to know exactly what to do when shooting began because there would be no time for communication or coordination once the deception ended and the assault commenced. Timing would be critical. The commandos needed to board, move through the plane, and take positions near all 4 hijackers before anyone initiated the assault. If shooting started before everyone was in position, hijackers not immediately engaged would have time to detonate explosives or execute hostages. The assault had to be simultaneous in multiple locations: the cockpit, the front cabin, the rear cabin. Each hijacker neutralized at the same instant, giving none of them time to react. The signal would be simple. When Barak gave the word, transmitted via hidden radio, each operator would draw his weapon and engage his assigned target simultaneously. From that moment, the outcome would be determined by speed, accuracy, and the willingness to fire instantly without hesitation. Hesitation would mean hostage deaths, misses would mean mission failure. Anything less than flawless execution would lead to disaster. As planning continued, Israeli negotiators maintained contact with the hijackers, pretending to discuss prisoner releases while actually buying time for the assault team's preparation. Negotiations were deliberately slow, filled with bureaucratic delays and requests for clarification that stretched hours into days. The hijackers grew increasingly irritated, threatening to begin executing hostages if Israel continued to stall. But they had not yet carried out their threats, suggesting they remained uncertain about how to proceed. Psychological operations played a crucial role in shaping the hijackers' decisions. Israeli officials provided the hijackers with regular meals, water, and updates, creating a routine that normalized the situation and reduced immediate tension. They allowed journalists to photograph the plane from a distance, giving the hijackers a sense that their actions were receiving international attention and that pressure was mounting on the Israeli government. They managed to create an environment where the hijackers believed they retained control, unaware that each hour of delay brought them closer to the moment when the team in white coveralls would board their plane. On the evening of May 9, after 30 hours of standoff, Israeli officials informed the hijackers that a mechanical problem had been detected. The aircraft's life support systems showed anomalies requiring immediate inspection. Mechanics would need to board to diagnose the issue. The hijackers could monitor the work, ensuring the mechanics did nothing but inspect systems and perform necessary repairs. The request was presented as routine and non-threatening, simply responsible aircraft maintenance protecting everyone on board. The hijackers discussed the request among themselves, speaking in Arabic over the cabin intercom. Mossad translators listening through surveillance equipment heard them debate whether this was legitimate or a trap. After nearly an hour of discussion, they agreed to permit maintenance access but set strict conditions. Mechanics would be searched before boarding. They would work under constant observation. Any suspicious behavior would lead to immediate violence. The hijackers were cautious, but not paranoid enough to realize the mechanics could be an undercover commando team. At 22 o'clock, the assault team assembled in a hangar adjacent to where Flight 571 stood under spotlights. They donned the borrowed white coveralls, checked their concealed weapons, and reviewed the plan one last time. Each operator knew his role, his target, his sector of responsibility. They knew what to do if the deception was compromised, if a hijacker noticed something wrong, if a hostage panicked and revealed the commandos' true identities. Every contingency had been considered and planned for, though all understood that once they boarded, variables would multiply beyond what any planning session could foresee. Ehud Barak briefly addressed the team. His words were not dramatic or inspirational, simply professional and focused. He reminded them that 100 lives depended on flawless execution, that they would have one chance to get it right, and that hesitation or error would be fatal. He told them he trusted each of them absolutely, that they were Israel's best operators, and that when the shooting started, they must fire without doubt or mercy because the hijackers would show none. Benjamin Netanyahu's team would board first, proceed into the passenger cabin to take position near the two female hijackers. Barak's squad would follow, heading to the cockpit where the male hijackers controlled Captain Levy and the crew. Additional teams would secure the aircraft exits, ensuring no hijacker could escape and that hostages could evacuate immediately after the assault concluded. At 22:45, the first commandos approached the plane, carrying toolboxes and equipment cases. They moved with the casual professionalism of repair crews who had done this countless times, showing no tension or haste that might alert observers. The hijackers watched from the windows, scrutinizing every movement. The commandos maintained their roles impeccably, speaking to each other in technical terminology about pressurization systems and environmental controls, pointing at components and discussing diagnostic procedures. The aircraft's front door opened. A hijacker stood in the doorway, pistol visible. He inspected each mechanic boarding. The commandos submitted to pat-down searches, allowing the hijacker to check them for weapons while their firearms remained hidden inside sealed toolboxes the hijacker did not open. The searches were thorough enough to satisfy the hijacker's suspicion, but not comprehensive enough to discover the hidden arsenal. Netanyahu's team entered the passenger cabin, walking down the aisle, inspecting overhead panels and vents. They carried clipboards and diagnostic tools, maintaining their mechanic personas while systematically taking positions near the two female hijackers, who watched with suspicion but no overt alarm. The team worked slowly, deliberately, giving Barak's team time to board and advance to the cockpit before the assault signal. Inside the passenger cabin, hostages watched the mechanics with desperate hope. Some recognized these were unusual maintenance workers, noticing subtle details hinting at military training, how they moved with coordinated precision, how they took positions with clear fields of fire, the focused intensity beneath their relaxed demeanor. But the hostages remained silent, instinctively understanding that revealing anything would provoke violence before the rescuers were ready. Barak's team reached the cockpit, where Ali Taha controlled the crew with a pistol and grenade. The Commandos explained they needed access to cockpit systems to complete their diagnosis. Taha hesitated, clearly suspecting something amiss, but ultimately permitted entry under his direct observation. The Commandos entered the cramped cockpit. Their toolboxes were within inches of Taha. Their hands were steady despite the adrenaline flooding their systems. Everyone was in position. All 4 hijackers were now within arm's reach of Commandos, who appeared to be inspecting equipment, but were actually waiting for the signal to draw weapons and open fire. The moment had arrived when deception would end and violence would begin, when mechanics would become assault forces, and where the line between success and catastrophe would be measured in fractions of a second. Barak's voice came over hidden radios. One word: execute. 16 Commandos drew their weapons simultaneously. The transformation from mechanics to operators was instantaneous. White coveralls suddenly seemed incongruous as pistols emerged from toolboxes and operators seized their targets. The passenger cabin erupted with precisely controlled violence as Netanyahu's team engaged the female hijackers, firing multiple headshots from less than 2 meters away. The hijackers died before they could react. Their weapons fell from hands that never managed to pull triggers or release grenades. In the cockpit, Barak's team shot Taha before he could raise his pistol or activate the grenade he carried. 22 caliber bullets fired at point-blank range penetrated his skull, killing him instantly. The grenade remained clutched in his hand as he collapsed. The other male hijacker, positioned near the cockpit door, turned toward the gunfire and was engaged by Commandos firing from inside the cabin. He died standing. Multiple rounds ended his threat before he could comprehend that the mechanics were soldiers and that his operation had catastrophically failed. From the first shot to the neutralization of the last hijacker, the assault lasted 16 seconds. No hostage was injured by gunfire. No grenade detonated. Accuracy was absolute. Execution flawless. Once the shooting stopped, Commandos immediately began evacuating hostages through emergency exits while others secured the aircraft and confirmed all hijackers were dead, wounded, and potentially still dangerous. Captain Levy, still at the controls as the cockpit filled with gunsmoke and the body of Ali Taha crumpled beside him, maintained his professionalism. He began shutdown procedures while Commandos cleared the cockpit, ensuring no explosives were set to detonate by timer or dead man's switch. The crew, trained to handle emergencies, but never having experienced anything like this, followed evacuation protocols they had practiced, but never expected to use under such circumstances. In the passenger cabin, hostages evacuated via emergency slides, while Commandos provided security and ensured everyone exited quickly, but without panic. Some hostages wept, others were silent in shock, some trembled from adrenaline. Medics waiting on the tarmac began treating minor injuries from the evacuation process. Bruised limbs, sprained ankles, nothing serious compared to what could have happened had the assault failed. Netanyahu and his team remained aboard, conducting systematic searches to ensure no secondary devices or additional hijackers were hidden anywhere. They cleared the cargo hold, checked lavatories, inspected overhead bins. Thoroughness was vital because complacency after apparent success had led to casualties in past operations when missed threats suddenly emerged after operators lowered their guard. Media coverage of the rescue operation was immediate and extensive. Journalists who had covered the standoff from outside the security perimeter witnessed the evacuation and reported the successful hostage rescue. By morning, international headlines celebrated Israel's successful hostage rescue, noting the innovative tactics and precise execution that saved nearly all hostages while neutralizing all hijackers. The success of the operation validated the concept that hijacked planes were vulnerable to assault if deception could place operators close to terrorists before hostile intent was revealed. But it also highlighted risks. One hostage, Miriam Anderson, had been wounded during the initial hijacking and died from her injuries. Despite the rescue's success, her death was a painful reminder that even flawless execution cannot eliminate all risks when dealing with armed terrorists willing to kill. The tactical lessons of Operation Isotope influenced hostage rescue doctrine worldwide. Special Forces units studied the operation, recognizing that traditional dynamic entry methods were inadequate for hijacking scenarios where terrorists could immediately kill hostages or detonate explosives. The Israeli approach demonstrated that deception could replace speed, that infiltrating operators inside through trickery was more effective than breaching from outside with violence. European counterterrorism units began developing similar capabilities, creating scenarios where operators could approach hijacked planes disguised as catering staff, maintenance crews, or negotiators. The fundamental concept of mechanics becoming soldiers in an instant became a template for operations where overwhelming speed was impossible, but deception could create opportunities for surprise. The psychological impact on Palestinian militant organizations was significant. Plane hijackings had been a favored tactic because they generated international attention, provided hostages for negotiation, and seemed relatively safe from military intervention once the plane landed. Operation Isotope demonstrated that Israel would risk hostage lives rather than negotiate, and that hijacked planes were not sanctuaries, but potential ambush sites where operators could approach under false pretenses and execute a rescue before terrorists realized what was happening. For the commandos who participated, the operation became a defining moment in military careers that later extended into political leadership. Benjamin Netanyahu would reference his role in Operation Isotope throughout his political career, using it to demonstrate his personal experience combating terrorism and his understanding of calculated risks necessary to confront existential threats. Ehud Barak similarly would draw on his operational experience to establish credibility on security issues dominating Israeli politics. But the operation also carried costs beyond tactical success. The psychological burden of conducting close-quarters combat in confined spaces surrounded by civilians, firing lethal weapons inches from innocent people, created lasting stress for operators who realized the reality that hesitation or error would have led to catastrophic casualties. Several commandos later acknowledged facing anxiety and intrusive memories, standard responses to operations where success required life-or-death decisions in split seconds. The broader question raised by Operation Isotope, but not resolved, was whether tactical success addressed strategic realities. Israel demonstrated it could rescue hostages by military means, but this capability did not prevent future hijackings or diminish the underlying conflicts motivating such attacks. Palestinian militants continued operations, adapting tactics in response to Israeli countermeasures, while Israel refined its responses, creating an evolutionary cycle where each innovation on one side prompted adaptation on the other. 40 years later, the white coveralls and toolboxes used in Operation Isotope are displayed in Israeli military museums alongside photographs and operational reports. They represent a concrete moment when creativity and courage combined to solve an impossible tactical problem, when soldiers became actors convincing enough to deceive armed terrorists, and when 16 men in maintenance uniforms conducted a rescue that affirmed the principle that hostage situations are not necessarily no-win scenarios requiring negotiation and concession. The question that remains, however, is whether such operations are genuine solutions or merely tactical victories within conflicts that resist resolution by military means alone. Operation Isotope saved lives immediately, but did not prevent future hijackings or address the grievances motivating Palestinian militancy. It demonstrated what special forces could achieve, but also revealed the limits of tactical superiority in addressing strategic political realities. When the last hostages descended the emergency slides and the plane finally fell silent, except for the movements of commandos conducting final sweeps, the operation transitioned from execution to aftermath. The shooting stopped, but the questions it raised about how nations confront terrorism, what risks are acceptable in hostage scenarios, and whether military solutions resolve political problems would continue long after the last shot was fired, and the last mechanic removed his white coverall to reveal the combat uniform beneath. If you found this gripping account of strategy and bravery insightful, please like this video, subscribe for more detailed historical narratives, and share it with others who appreciate profound stories of courage and innovation. Courage and innovation.